So, I want to talk a little bit about something I discovered recently while learning algebra again. So I was talking with a new friend about dimensional physics and getting more and more reasons to learn math. So a little bit about me, I talk a lot about quantum engineering and dimensional physics and theoretical physics, quantum science, and all sorts of mathematical theories, anything from macroeconomics to behavioral economics. I really like theoretical math, but I struggle greatly with using math, which is, I think, surprises a lot of people. I never got further than pre-algebra in school. I accidentally got put into an algebra program, I think in my junior year of high school, before they realized that I hadn't finished pre-algebra. So senior year, they put me back into pre-algebra. I dropped out because obviously you can't graduate with at least completing algebra. But earlier this year, I took a pre-algebra course after I read a book called A Mind for Numbers, and I learned something quite fascinating that I struggled with in high school, prioritizing the information of simplification. So when I was being taught math, I was taught the value of math was to solve problems. So simplification didn't really compute for me because I'm like, what's the point of this? It's not actually solving anything. You know, is math so hard that you need to simplify things? And anyways, long story short, when I retook pre-algebra earlier this year, it was mind-blowing for me. It really unlocked the part of my brain that was struggling with learning code for so long, and I couldn't really sustain learning code for more than a few days at a time before just giving up completely. But it started to get easier every day. I was actually retaining things simply because I decided to retain the importance of simplification, which I realize all of coding has to do with building abstractions, which are just kind of like simplification inside out. So now that I'm on my way into an algebra course, like a 12 or 14 part algebra course on LinkedIn Learning. In the very first video, the very first section, they talk about something they call the golden rule of algebra formulations. And it is, shoot, let's see if I can recall this on the spot now. Balancing. So equation balancing or something like that. And it's interesting because I was just talking to that friend I mentioned earlier in this video about the difference between balance and harmony. And he was talking about balancing things, and I was explaining to him the difference from my perspective between you know, the desire to balance things comes from, you know, the human ego, whereas there's a natural order that doesn't need to be balanced, which is quite fascinating because that's kind of the premise of, you know, without modern humans, the world is it's self-balancing, it's self-correcting, perfectly self-correcting. Nothing gets too far out of whack without external interruption in an ecosystem. And when it comes down to it, the more macro you get in the way you look at nature, you realize that if a comet destroys a planet that has a perfect ecosystem, in the big picture of the universe, it doesn't really matter. But what's really interesting is it's all this natural balance. Like, stars are creating matter and spitting it out into the universe, and black holes are sucking it up and essentially compressing it and storing it. And I think this is pretty beautiful because we have the human nature is to create. Like, we are like stars. We are that singularity that is not a black hole. We are that balance to the destructive nature of creation, which is kind of paradoxical when you think of it. Creation is in itself destructive when you're in between a star and a black hole in the big picture of things. And what I realized is balancing is really emulating the natural balance, the natural order of things. But harmony is just respecting the natural order of things. That's why I like Eastern philosophies like Wu Wei, which really teach us how to understand that, like, balancing is only necessary when we're building artificial constructs. When we're literally trying to find something that is sustainable, it's better to emulate nature rather than try and build a perfect system. And it's really understanding that if we want to build the perfect sustainable system, we kind of just have to get out of the way, figure out how to get out of the way. That's really why, one of the reasons I liked the movie Arrival, and I just watched that again recently and noticed one of the things they said about these interdimensional interlopers that are helping out humans in the past because they need our help in the future. So they're altering the past by doing interdimensional interloping. There's something they say about these interdimensional septipods is that their ships are only visible. There's no other way to detect them. They leave no footprint. And I think that's quite beautiful. And when I saw the ship's design inside and out, I'm like, this is so minimalistic. Like, extreme stoicism to the point where they interact, communicate, and live instinctually. And I was really blown away by this, and it reminded me that, like, you know, certain things like algebra, like, it's interesting how the interdimensional aliens, like, they didn't understand algebra, but they got things like calculus. And I thought that was, they get things like geometry and calculus, but they don't understand even the simplest of algebraic formulas. And I thought that was pretty darn fascinating. And it's really what I'm getting at here. It's understanding that balance is this golden rule of algebra, but harmony is really just getting out of the way of the natural balance. And there is the natural balance of things, where if we don't interfere, it has its own natural balance. We know this with natural ecosystems. You introduce one new element, one new foreign, one new alien element, and it only takes time for that to completely interrupt the entire course of that ecosystem. And a lot of what we believe in as a perfect system is actually a perfect system in time. So as long as time is moving forward for our human experience, we need to be mindful that a perfect system is a bubble just waiting to be popped. So we need to be mindful that if a perfect system requires even humans to be involved, human minds to be involved, or if they are for the benefit of the human mind, it is only a perfect system as long as it is consuming something. And if we can learn how to use mathematics and get away from the need of balancing things, I think that's kind of the beauty of algorithms. Algorithms are literally like creating new life, but they're logical life. Humans are irrational life, and our God is logic. I mean, it has been since the beginning of time. Literally, the original name for all gods roots back to the name logos, which literally means logic. Logic has always been our God. And what's interesting is we're creating new life every single time we create a formula, just like a human is not a God in the way monotheism may present it, but it is, infinite opportunity. It is, it can be anything, but it can also be nothing that we expect. And that's kind of the thing with formulas and algorithms, is they are only ever what we expect. And if we create one to help us see what we don't know how to see, we can't expect to know what it will see. And this is quite beautiful, because algorithms are the, same expression of creating life as when two parents decide to create a child. And sometimes it's purely accidental the way an algorithm comes out, the same way the creation of human life can be accidental. And this is quite beautiful. And this is really the end of my thought train on this. And I hope you enjoyed my little rant on the golden rule of balancing equations in algebra. So, thank you.